set of questions is around how you identify. So I wanted to ask if you identify as deaf or hard of hearing. That could be deaf with a little d or a capital D. So how do you kind of identify yourself?
Yeah, all my life I've identified myself as lowercase deaf, more so hard of hearing. I don't rely on sign language. I mostly lip read, and for the most part, it's all being hard of hearing.
Awesome. And just for some background for our readers, when did you lose your hearing? And can you explain like what level of hearing you have? And if there's, a particular name or kind of explanation of, yeah, like what level of hearing you do have.
It was a gradual decrease where I noticed I started losing my hearing around the age of 5, 6 years old. And I didn't really even know that I was hard of hearing, believe it or not. It was not until I had a hearing exam at school, which was, if you remember, done by the school nurse, and you line up and you raise your hand when you hear the beeps and repeat the words. And one year I passed, no problem. The next year they put a board up and I wasn't able to read lips. So then I realized, oh, wow, I think I'm losing my hearing. And they told my mom, and I went to get a hearing exam at Children's Hospital. And sure enough, I had a profound high frequency hearing loss in both ears. So yeah, it was tough to realize that, but I accommodated myself and did what I had to do to get what I needed.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I'm curious a little bit about I guess is kind of could all be sort of part of the same question, but I know just from our, short time so far working together that you're super open and really passionate about hearing loss and being hard of hearing. And I'm curious, I know that you just mentioned you started losing your hearing at a pretty early age. But where did your like confidence and your passion for, an advocacy come from? And was this something that your parents instilled in you, or is it something that maybe developed as you got older? Do you have like, is there anyone else in your family? Was it something that your parents, knew of, or was it new to them? I'm just curious how that all kind
Yeah,
of went.
awesome question. And just another thing that I love talking about. And it's this man right here. This is my grandfather.
Oh,
And
he's
as you can
adorable.
see, he had a hook. So he was a double amputee. What you don't see in the photo is he had a wooden leg.
Wow.
So when he was 26 years old, he was on his friend's boat and he actually fell off on a turn and he hit the propeller and lost his right hand. Luckily, he was a lefty, and his left shin down. So he wore a wooden leg. And he lived 55, 60 years of nothing but a successful life, both professionally, academically, socially, his family, everything was awesome. He just so happened to be a double amputee. And that to me was a true disability.
Yeah.
When I realized at 5.5, 6 years old, oh, I need hearing aids, I saw them as technology that helped me hear. Just like,
Yeah.
your dad, your mom wears glasses to help them see.
Right.
Well, this is a cool technology. It helped me hear better. And so that's all it ever was. And when I was a little kid, I made it normal for other little kids. And that's it. Ever since then, I grew more and more confident, over the years. There was only one time that I ever got made fun of. We can talk about that later, but yeah, definitely just carried the legacy of my grandfather and stayed as confident as I could.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely he sounds like a really strong person and definitely would be an inspiration for sure. somebody to look up to. Um, cool. So I I'm curious, I wanted to talk like a little bit about just technology and accessibility. I wanted to ask if you've used captions, which may sound silly because you work at 3Play now. But I'm curious, how you use captions, if you use captions, your thoughts on, I know you said you rely on lip reading, kind of how the two work together, your thoughts on bad captions, all of that. I'm sure you have thoughts and opinions.
It didn't happen overnight to become the best movie quota you'll ever meet. I read the captions. I love movies and animation and all sorts of, things like that. But yeah, I've relied on captions since I was a little kid, which makes me that much more, I guess, observant and good with vocabulary.
Yeah, I'm sure it
Reading the
helped your
captions.
reading. Yeah.
Exactly. Reading and a lot of times friends of mine, back in college, I would say, hey guys, yeah, if we're gonna watch this movie, could we just put on the captions? Dude, no. And I'm like, please. And then they finally said yes. And they didn't love it because they weren't good at glancing, which is what I've over time practiced. And you don't rely on reading the captions. You watch and you look down when you need them.
Right.
And on screen, I'm lip reading as well, which is very difficult to do because the face is not 3D when you're watching a movie. And then there's, background noise and all sorts of stuff, but it takes practice. But in short, I've relied on closed captions my whole life. And that is the reason why I work with 3Play Media. Now, I looked into this world of closed captions and tech and artificial intelligence, knowing I wanted to join this industry. I specifically chose 3Play Media for a couple of reasons, and that's accuracy and guaranteed turnaround time, which I know is very important. But going back to accuracy, there's nothing worse than bad captions. So that's it was funny when I first heard somebody calls them craptions. And I got a good giggle out of that.
Yeah, I think that's Ricky Pointer coined that term. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned too, like you don't, captions aren't really meant to be, well, I guess they can be, but if you have other tools that you use like lip reading, they're really assistive, like to, fill in what you miss, not just, it's not like reading a book where you're reading every single word. But yeah, it's definitely something you get used to. I don't know if you've watched In the Heights, if you're into, you're probably,
I've heard
I
of
feel
it.
like you're artsy. I was
I
gonna say, I don't
am.
know if you're into musical theater, but um, it's a musical and a TV version just came out. It's with Lin-Manuel Miranda. He wrote, from Hamilton. He wrote the music and
Cool.
everything. But if you, listen to Hamilton or anything, like it's a lot of like rap, and it's really fast.
Hmm.
So I actually watched the movie a few weeks ago with a friend, and then I was watching it. My husband Matt hadn't seen it yet, and we were watching it on my parents' account. My dad is hard of hearing, and so the captions were automatically turned on. And it's just crazy, like what you pick up. Like, you said you're a great movie quoter. I'm like, wow, that's the word. I just, was bopping around to the music, but I didn't hear half of
No,
it. So it's pretty interesting for sure.
that's a great point, and I encourage people to watch captions, use captions when they watch TV and movies. And now my friends, it's funny because years later, now they rely on it.
Yeah.
When we watch movies or shows like Peaky Blinders or
Mm-hmm.
Game of Thrones, anything with accents, it's
Yep.
tough.
Yeah.
You don't want to miss out on the content. It changes the whole meaning of the storyline. And then of course, music. We watch a lot of, say, Dave Matthews Band, past concerts. We have the DVDs, and we'll put the subtitles on because it shows the lyrics. And I don't hear lyrics. I'll get some words out of it, but I love music. My dad was a drummer. My mom was a baton twirler, but she has musical genes. She'll tell you. I play guitar, and I love music. Dave Matthews, John Mayer, Google Dolls, Matchbox 20, all of the good old bands. And I miss out on what it means. And until I look it up, then I'm like, oh my God. And then I get all emotional. I'm like, this is what it means. So there's something to be said about how important and how powerful captions are, how powerful words are,
Yeah,
and vocabulary.
definitely. Sorry for the dog barking in the background. She should, someone's
Okay.
coming in, but she should be.
I didn't even hear.
Um, yeah, going nuts. Anyway, um, yeah, I totally agree with you. I just am bad at lyrics just because I'm bad at lyrics. So I understand what you're saying. It's like when you read it and you realize what the words are, it's adds like a whole level of depth to the song.
Mhm.
Um, cool. Yeah, I'm curious, just kind of like continuing on the technology topic. Um, obviously, like anything else, there's pros and cons, and I'm just curious, how you feel technology in general helps or hurts your ability to communicate and navigate the world. I know particularly a lot of Apple products have a lot of built-in accessibility features, and I'm curious if there are any that you use, and yeah, just how you feel like they either help or kind of make things more challenging.
There's a lot out there that does help. I'm always looking for new technology that will help me in different scenarios. I just downloaded a new app that's called Olelo. I know I mentioned it to you a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
but you call through that app and it pulls up the captions, what you're saying and what the person on the other side is saying. It's not 100% accurate, but it helps. So that's one. What I need, and I think the world needs, is more live caption accessibility in different scenarios. Just the other day on Friday, we went to the team event, the social in Boston for Black Heritage, in celebration for Juneteenth. We went on the trolley tour through Boston, and the guide had a mask on,
Mm.
and the speakers weren't very good. We couldn't really hear or understand what was being said, and I was just glad to be driving through Boston. But yeah, we need some more live caption accessible options. um, Another thing is assistive hearing devices. There are got a little microphone that if you and I were on a walk, I could give it to you and it Bluetooth directly to my ears. Right now, I'm using a Bluetooth adapter to plug into my laptop called the TV connector, which also plugs into the TV, and I can hear directly what's happening on the TV of the laptop, which is amazing. Um, there are also other adapters, one called the Roger. The Roger is a little circular device that you can put in, say, your conference room, and it points to all the directions where there may be people. And if there's nobody on that side, you can click this side so that it's facing that direction to grab the volume so that it Bluetooths to my ears. That's called the Roger. I do not have that, but I know once we go
Yeah.
back to the office, that'd be very helpful for me. But those are some things that are out there. And then back in school days, I used what was called an FM system. I would give my teachers and professors this microphone that they would wear and they would talk into. Forget they even had it on. It was so light and easy to put on, and it would Bluetooth to my hearing aids up to about 75 feet. So I was always sitting in the front and participating in class. But the FM system was very helpful.
Cool. That's awesome. Um, I'm also curious, just from like a, sort of marketing and creator standpoint, what are things that you run into, maybe on your in your day to day, like online? Obviously now we're living in a time where like a lot of everything is online. What are things that you would say for like website creators, tech creators, content creators? Like what can people do better to be more accessible?
Hmm.
And if there's nothing like,
No, something's coming to mind, and it's, if you've seen Google's commercials, they do such a good job at highlighting people with hearing loss and
Mhm.
showing versus telling, showing the impact that it has on the world.
Yeah,
Those videos have 8, 9, 10 million views now. Just got launched a few weeks ago. Amazon also did it. So there's so much more focus nowadays on accessibility, the deaf and hard of hearing industry and community. Facebook did Deaf Hoops, a basketball league that you can, find people in your area that are deaf and play basketball with them, which is really cool. I'm a basketball player. The only thing I would say, going back to your question, is do more. More. And I'll tell you what, it makes all of us a better human being. If I was to, all of a sudden tomorrow have perfect hearing, sure, it would be cool, but I don't think I would want it. The perspective I have
yeah,
being hard of hearing makes me, I like to say, a great person, you
yeah.
know? So I would say do more and bring us all together.
I think that's great advice and a great suggestion. And I definitely agree. Like it gives you, a little bit more empathy, probably a little bit more, understanding and patience and different perspective. And I think we could all kind of benefit from like taking a step back and thinking about those things. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit about your, I guess, career. Obviously, like I said, you're at 3Play now, but I'd be curious to talk a little bit about your career sort of previous to 3Play and even back to your academic years. So I'm curious what your experience was like. I know you mentioned the Roger and some of the other tools that you mentioned. You had sort of the amplification devices for your teachers and things like that, and that you were always sitting up front. But particularly in higher ed, did you ever take online courses or have videos as part of your courses and need specific accommodations such as captioning or otherwise? How are those things handled? What was your experience like as a student?
Great question. And something I'm really starting to look back on, having that I, worked closely with the Disability Services Group at University of New Hampshire. And I know at 3Play Media, we work closely with disability services groups all over the country, which is a very smart, way to get into the university to do more and more captions for more and more videos, all throughout the university. It was up to me to be responsible to accommodate for myself every which way I did. And I took advantage of note takers. I had somebody in my class, happens to be my best friend, Dan, who, took those notes for me and himself, and then published them on the web for other students with hearing loss, and that was very helpful, but you don't know what you don't know. And as we learn, post education, what's out there, it's like, okay, now I work for 3Play Media. I have a mission to help as many disability services groups at universities, colleges, community college, all over the country get this accessibility available for their
Mhm.
students that may be hard of hearing, deaf, low vision, no vision, caption, transcription, audio description, all of those services that we provide, I didn't have at UNH. So I now have a personal mission to get it for those people. And, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. Like you said, you don't know what you don't know. And it's interesting. I mean, it's amazing that you've been not only an advocate for yourself, which is hard. Sometimes it's harder to advocate for yourself even than it is for others. But that you've also taken that and kind of like made it your mission and like your career, which is awesome. But it's also like it's a little bit, I don't want to say, I don't know if the word is disappointing, but it is. It's like there's so many resources and tools, and not only would they help individuals with hearing loss, but they would help students who have learning disabilities or who
Mm,
are learning English as a second language, or whatever the case may be, just who happen to just prefer reading notes or
right.
things like that, learn better that way, need to go back and I'm someone who, like, I could read something and kind of goes like in one ear out the other. I'd have to go back and reread and highlight,
Same,
like
same.
transcripts would have really helped, me as well for various other reasons. So it is kind of crazy that, it's not more readily, um, I guess, like offered, maybe is the word. And I see it,
Right.
with other things like technology. And I, asked you about my dad, for instance. Like, he goes to the audiologist and they give him hearing aids, but no one ever told him like, hey, you should do this or you should do that. And it's out there, but it kind of becomes like a little bit of a personal burden,
Yeah.
which is
I'm thinking
interesting.
back, at my LinkedIn account, and you
Yeah.
mentioned professional career and whatnot. And if you look under my name, my headline, they call it, is being hard of hearing allows me to listen and be a passionate solution seller.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm in sales, but it's really the educational side of sales. It comes easy to me or natural to me to sell
Hmm.
once I, discover who the right person is to sell to.
Right.
Um, but that's not my goal, is to sell to make money. It's to sell to educate people, to make sure that they know, because we don't know what we don't know, what's out there,
Yeah.
and if it's going to help another wave of people be innovative for their own company, because now all of a sudden they can hear and read a transcript, sky's the limit.
Yeah.
Companies like
Absolutely.
Tesla, Apple, they're already such innovative companies. But do they caption and transcript everything? I don't know.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. So kind of transitioning out of your, academic life, and I'm curious, I obviously know you're in sales now, and you just mentioned that. I'm curious, at 3Play, but also maybe even more so before 3Play, um, what, did you need any sort of accommodations in your career and in your job role? How did how have the companies that you've worked for handled that? I think particularly in sales, you're on the phone a lot, you're talking to people. And I'm just curious, like, for others who may be getting into their careers and have hearing loss, like, it may be interesting to hear like what how is that received, and how have you kind of handled any barriers that have come up?
That's a great question, because just the other day, I realized for the first time in my career, I'm working with and for a company that is all about accessibility, diversity, inclusion, accommodations, you name it. And 3Play has really helped me seek those things that I don't know to, and what I need in different scenarios. Whereas my previous companies, there really wasn't much help. Um, and I took the responsibility on my own to help myself. I was offered help, but I kind of, ran with it on my own and thought I had the help I needed, but I really probably didn't. Um, Another thing I thought of was I used to use at one of my previous jobs a telephone system called Caption Call. And this is provided by the government, actually. You have one? Nice,
Yeah, there's one right next to me. I'm
nice.
actually I'm at my parents' house right now, so I'm at my
Oh,
dad's
great.
desk.
Exactly. So you know exactly. Caption call being, the captions appear on the screen and there's somebody on the other line that's a third party listening in to hear what that person's saying so that I can then hear it. That was very helpful. I got it for myself at one of my jobs. Um, that was helpful in hearing, shipping addresses, phone
Yeah,
numbers, other referrals, names of people, proper pronouns, but it wasn't perfect. Now that the world is becoming so virtual, I am all about screen time. Sure,
yeah,
Zoom fatigue is real, but it helps me, and I'm hungry enough to, stay on the line and stay on the screen
yeah.
throughout the day. But
Awesome. Cool. Um, I guess the next sort of like category, if you will, I'd like to talk about sort of um I guess you could call it like advice or misconceptions. And I'm curious what what are some common mistakes that people make when they're interacting with someone who's hard of hearing? And I guess kind of a continuation of that, like what can people do better to make it easier?
mm, that's awesome. And again, going back to do more, now people are really starting to be more open-minded to, oh wow, there is somebody in my network that's hard of hearing. Maybe this is how I should approach them or reach out to them, or if I'm with them, get their attention. So there's some tricks and tips for folks that are deaf or hard of hearing. You never want to scream at somebody. You never want to get mad about them not be able to hear. You really want to get their attention by waving, flagging them down, and then they'll open their shoulders and look at you. Clapping doesn't always help. Stomping on the ground, believe it or not, can help at times because you're feeling the vibration.
Yeah.
If you're at a table with that person, you can bang on the table as well and get their attention. So there's different tips and tricks, but yeah, it's it's progressing.
Yeah. Um, cool. That's helpful. It's helpful to see to think about even things like feeling, tapping the table or the floor where you could feel the, vibration rather than like you have to be looking for if someone's
And
waving.
another friendly thing to do is if you're behind the person, you can tap them lightly on the shoulder.
Yeah.
So that's my roommate does that very
Mhm.
well for me. And it just so happens that his mother is deaf and his
Oh,
father is hard of hearing. So that's something that he's used to, but not every roommate is like that.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm thankful that he's aware of how to get in touch with me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, cool. And then I guess I know you shared a little bit about this, about kind of how you feel like having, hearing loss makes you who you are, and makes you like a little bit more kind of makes you a better person in many ways. But I'm curious if what you would say is like your favorite or the best thing about being hard of hearing.
There's a lot of different ways I can go here. um, One of the great, stories that I have from my college days was being able to lip read
Hmm.
across a restaurant or a bar. And I used to walk into the bar with my buddies. One was Dan, the note taker, right? And
Uh-huh.
he's 6'5", so he's easily able to be seen, and he's a good looking guy, right? So a lot of the women would say, "Oh, that tall guy's cute," and I got their lips. So I say,
That's
"Hey,
so
Dan,
funny.
6 o'clock right there." And
A
then
good
eventually we
wingman.
get we get a drink and we go over and say hello. That's just one way, but I would elaborate on lip reading. Um, Lip reading is certainly a skill that is just it's fun and it's helpful. And of course, people want to have fun with it with me and say, "What am I saying?" and not say anything, but just move their
Right.
lips. And of
Just
course,
yeah.
"Hello, what am I saying?" And oh my God. But at times where, if somebody's far away and there's a lot of background noise, I can still communicate.
Yeah.
Or if people are trying to say, "Tell me a secret," and I'm like, "Don't use voice, just move your lips and I'll be able to understand what you're
Right.
saying." So, but I will say on the flip side, when we used to play that game, what was it called? Like telephone?
Telephone, yeah.
Oh, I was so like, I ruined it every time. I
Um,
like sweat when I realized, I'm like, "Oh, that was my fault."
that's actually funny that you say that. I took a sign language course in college, and one of the things that the professor was deaf. The whole class was taught just fully immersive, no speaking. And he would have us play ASL telephone, and it's
Oh,
hard. I mean, yeah, for someone who doesn't know the language. So I feel your pain because, I was in a group, we were kind of all in the same boat, but still, if you knew if you were the one who kind of screwed it up,
yeah.
and um,
It's
but
funny you bring that up because, and I did take one course of ASL at University of New Hampshire. My senior year, I didn't have to take a fourth class, but I took a fourth class. My girlfriend at the time had to take ASL, and I said, "All
mm,
right, I'll do it with you." And one of the things we did was ASL telephone.
yeah,
So that was funny. But yeah, yeah.
yeah, cool. Um, awesome. And then I guess my other question as far as like advice is, being that you did start losing your hearing as a young kid, what would your advice be to someone who has a child now who, finds out that they're have hearing loss, or kind of have progressive hearing loss, and may lose more hearing later in life?
Amazing question. Very relevant right now. Tomorrow, I have a speaking engagement with a company that is creating a medicine to restore genetic hearing loss.
Wow.
And they're in this world, just like we are, about accessibility, hearing loss, and so forth. And there's a group out there, there's two different groups, Hands and Voices, and they're actually a customer of 3Play Media. I saw their Washington State chapter reached out to us. And then another one is AG Bell. So these are organizations that help young families with children that have hearing loss. And I love being a resource to these young parents. And now friends of mine are reaching out because I'm 31 and
Mhm.
all of our friends are starting to have kids, right? So friends of friends, "Oh, I thought of you, and my friend's daughter, my blah blah blah." And I love that. It warms my heart, and I want to be there for them. And there's so many resources that they can look into to start thinking about those, accommodations, um, local resources for them to connect with wherever they may be located. So, there's a lot out there, but there's it's a scary thing. I know my parents, when they first realized I was hard of hearing and I'm their second child, um, what do we do? No one in the family was deaf or hard of hearing. Like, this is so random. And it was new to them just as it was new to me. But they, you know, asked questions, they connected with different organizations. They went to my IEP meetings in school to meet the teachers and, go over my audiogram and how I learn the best I can, and how to keep me engaged and things like that. So that was all super
Yeah.
helpful. But yeah, I definitely encourage young families with young kids to just seek resources that are out there, because there's so many.
That's awesome. Um, this just made me think of another question I'm writing down before I forget. Cool. So I guess my next couple of questions, probably the last couple of questions I have on my end. I guess there may be a little bit about like culture, maybe a little miscellaneous, but I'm curious, sort of maybe segueing into the next question. So, have I know that you mentioned the organizations that are working on kind of building, I guess, medication or treatment, to sort of prevent or cure genetic hearing loss. And my first thought was, that I'm sure that's so controversial. I know that a lot of people in the deaf and hard of hearing communities, there's a wide range of opinions, like there is in any community. But it made me think about, I don't know if you watched, oh, now I'm blanking on the TV show uh that Niall DeMarco did at Gallaudet. What
Yep.
is it called? Totally blanking on the
Deaf
name.
EU.
Yes, yes. But one of the things, that they really highlight in Deaf U is kind of these different maybe subcultures, if you will, of people who either grew up in a deaf household, or versus the people, maybe they know ASL, their whole family uses ASL, versus the people who rely on speaking, versus the people who have a cochlear implant, or vice versa. And I'm curious if you've ever experienced that, and as someone who doesn't necessarily use ASL and who relies on lip reading, and have you ever experienced kind of being made to feel like you weren't deaf enough, or anything like that?
Um, I would say no. However, there's so many different groups, like you mentioned, that now I'm going to go back to your last question. And I said no, but almost yes, because I use my hearing so well and I lip read so well that at times even my best friends say he's been faking it the whole time. And it's not an insult, but it's almost like, if you only knew how hard I work on a
Right.
daily basis and you don't even realize it. And I half the
Yeah.
time don't even realize it, but I'm doing so many things that I need to do to accommodate myself, and you don't even realize it. And that's
Yeah.
tiring. So, but there's different buckets, right, of hearing loss, and different ways people associate themselves. And you mentioned an important thing about it can be controversial, where people might think the genetic hearing loss, the medicine, oh my God, why would you make someone's hearing perfect where they could grow up and be this you know activist on hearing loss and be such a great person. Now they have perfect hearing. And I see that, but just like anything in life, there's options. right? This medicine, this company, this mission is doing something so amazing that, I mean, they've gotten funded of $100+ million. There's a lot that goes into it. The people are incredible, and they're just tackling a mission to help a certain percentage of people that grow up with hearing loss. And if their parents say, yes, I want my child to have it, or no, that's an
Right,
option.
that's fine. Yeah.
Just like I want my child to wear hearing aids, or I want them to rely on ASL, or I want them to so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So, you know, I get the whole controversy thing, but because it's real, but
Right.
I also back up everybody's mission, purpose,
Absolutely.
and you know, can resonate one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, people's decisions, it's hard to know what somebody else is going through. And, like you said, like even your example, like sure, to some of, the people that you interact with, it seems seamless, but all the, I'm sure the technology that you have, it's costly, it's time consuming, it breaks, you have to make sure you have it with you and, are in a position to be able to use it, whatever the case may be. And, everybody's situation, whether we're talking about hearing loss or whatever the case may be, is different. And so it's great to have options because then you can make the option for yourself, for your child, and you don't have to worry about, about what somebody else, you know,
Exactly.
chooses. Um, Cool. And then I'm curious if you feel like sharing. You mentioned earlier that you could think of one time when you were made fun of for your hearing loss, and I'm curious if you're willing to share that.
Lisa, my Bluetooth just stopped. It's nothing on your end, it's my end. Let me see if I can just get it right back on.
Yeah, no worries.
See, this is going back to options where I wish there was something else out there that didn't tap out the Bluetooth, but I think we're
Yeah,
back.
cool. Are you good now?
The light came back on. Say something else.
Testing. Can you hear me? Cool.
Awesome.
Um,
Back.
yeah, so I was just asking if you're comfortable and willing to share. You mentioned there was one example that you could think of when you were made fun of. I'm curious if you would share that with
Great.
our
Thank you for
readers.
bringing that back up. I'm
Yeah.
always comfortable sharing that. I was at my dad's cousin's son's bar mitzvah,
Mhm.
and I've never met them before, and I was 7 years old. So I was a year and a half into wearing hearing aids. Still new to me, still new to my brother, and we just, approached our first interesting experience where I'm sitting at the kids' table, and all of the kids, my cousin, my distant cousin, and all of his friends were making fun of my hearing aids. And they were calling me balloon ears because back in the day, they were a lot bigger than you can't even tell that they're here.
Mhm.
But, back in the day, they were pretty big and they did look kind of like balloons. My brother recognized they were making fun of me, and I had no idea. I'm eating my food, and all of a sudden I realized it, and I read their lips and saw balloon ears.
Mm.
And as soon as I saw that, I just started crying. I ran over to my parents and just, you know, the mother, so my father's cousin, came to their table and said, "What happened?" And I told them they were making fun of me, and they, everything got taken care of. But that was really an amazing thing to happen so early on,
Yeah.
because ever since that moment, I was now on offense. I didn't allow for that opportunity to come up really ever
Yeah.
again. Very, once in a blue moon. Couple times it happened in sports, but I said, hey, I'm better, we're winning. Look at the scoreboard or
Right.
something. It never affected me. But yeah, that was definitely the first. And it's funny because a year and a half ago, I brought it up to my mom and I said,
Yeah.
Ma, do you remember the first time I ever got made fun of? And she said, yeah. And I said, it was that cousin Cheryl's son, Bummett. And she knows, it's a
Yeah.
very memorable
Yeah.
for me and, my mom, my parents.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure. I mean, especially as a little kid, I'm sure that that was really upsetting to them too. Their son being made fun of for something that is, beyond everyone's control. It's like when your parents realize that there's certain things that they can't like fix for you or protect you from. It's, I think, hard. Um, but you seem like you turned out okay.
that's
um,
why she always reminds me she's my mother and she'll always be my mother. And she,
yeah,
when she calls me, are you home yet? Yes, mom, I'm 31 years old. Like I know how to go from the restaurant to my apartment. Okay, just making sure.
exactly. Mine does the same thing.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I guess my, last question, and I know we also have another exciting 3-play event. So I don't want to, I want to give you a chance to like have a break in the middle, but that's pretty much everything I wanted to ask. I guess if there's any last final things you wanted to share, feel free.
Yeah, as I continue to mention and I'm consistent on is I love being a resource to people. So, if you come across anybody within the 3-play network that ever
Yeah.
wants to chat, or if you, eventually post this video in pieces and they see it and want to set up a speaking engagement with their company, I'm very open to doing that as well. It's fun for me. I used to do it at UNH. I spoke to the to be speech pathologists and
Mhm.
audiologists. And I just want to put myself out there as much as I can,
Yeah.
um, and be the motivational speaker that I know I can be. And, I resonate with people like Tony Robbins and Simon Sinek and Gary Vaynerchuk and all these motivational speakers. And I've got almost an edge on some of them where, I'm living without something
Right.
that they're living with. Um, and I'm not comparing us, I'm just saying
Yeah.
together, myself, Gary Vee, Tony Robbins, Simon Sinek, we're powerful, powerful people with powerful, meaningful missions.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Awesome. Well,